Hello and welcome to the Explorer's Journal, the first, and thus the best, Ark World podcast. Join me south of the Draken's Fall and north of the Jernspeak. Join me from the farthest western point of Essandaluca to the eastern shores of Halvamain. The mages in the Mildark provide me the room and the magic at Mount Orion to project my voice all around the world of Archimundi Altius. On today's episode, let's get into the general overview of the Halfling faction and some strategies that you could use on the table. Quick disclaimer before we start though, the information presented is based on current rules for Halflings released in April of 2020, so some changes may occur as updates to the factions happen. I'm joined once again by Dagfinn.
Hello.
So, how do you feel about the model quality of the second edition Halflings?
Oh, I'm a nostalgic person at heart, and every time I've mentioned the old ones to Alex, he shudders, and he's not really fond of them. But I think he's managed to keep his comic feel to them and like bit caricature style that was very dominant in the previous ones. But he managed to keep them into the new ones, and at the same time just improved the sculpting quality. So I'm very pleased in general by both the old ones and the new ones.
Me too. I have an old Halfling Battle Cook and the new one, and I can definitely see the growth in his style between the two editions. He goes for a more comic cartoony style with the second edition stuff, which it's really nice to see that kind of growth.
He did have it's like a period around Troubles in the North where he tried to make them better and forgot a bit about the caricature bit of them. Right. And I'm glad to see that caricature bit has come back and it makes crazy models with just fun little things in them, like the thing flinger bollocks.
Yeah. Just
a stupid, daft looking, grass chewing thing.
Flicker.
That is, yeah. It doesn't have to be serious and hardcore to be a good gaming piece.
No, and even on that same note, the ammo monkey with the Imperials, you take something serious and you throw in that little curve and it just brings so much more character to it.
Exactly.
But especially Halflings, The most serious character is really either the Sheriff or the Trollhound.
And I think thinking new versus old. In the I think it was the second edition Kickstarter, we brought out a limited number of the old Rabin Tood models, and when you hold the old one and the new one next to each other, you really see the difference in quality, and it's immense.
Yeah, I mean that's what you want. You want that improvement over time, and it's really, Alex has knocked it out of the park over and over again.
Yeah, and keeping them good looking and funny and versatile. I think it's the thing as well. You can use them, both the new ones and old ones, next to each other and doesn't really look out of place.
Yeah, definitely. That's something I noticed too, playing the old Battle Cook with the new models. They still fit. Like nothing's changed too much. I mean, one of the things that really attracts me to the Halflings is their playstyle too. In StarCraft, I was the Zerg, which it's all about having a ton of weak things, but it's more than your opponent's strong things. So you win with quantity.
And you do, and that's the thing with the game as well. It's not necessarily how much it costs, but how many action points you get per coin you spend. So even if a Ewok Brute or an Elf War Chief costs a lot of gold, it doesn't necessarily give you more action points than, say, the same amount of gold in Halfling Militias.
Right, exactly. And when you look at it, Halfling Militia 2 AP, but they also have the make orders and take orders. 3 weak models could be equal to 1 strong model.
Indeed. And also, the weaker models, you got that advantage that you win priority, not the priority role, but you control the battlefield more because you can choose when to put the major models in play. Let's say you play a Wild Elf force, and you don't want your war chief to be the first one to commit.
Yeah, especially if you fail those summon rolls as a war chief, then
Yes,
you have no army in front of you.
exactly. While the halflings, you can always, all right, I move this militia a bit forward, and I'll try to shoot with it. And you hold back on the ones that really will make you round. You've got a lot more flexibility to control the game than you do with more expensive models.
Yeah, because a lot of halfling abilities too, like on the sheriff, he has that furious wallop, so that lowers an opponent's AP, and he's only 80 gold. So if he lowers the AP of a wild elf that's 120 gold by one, and then they suddenly have only 3 or 4 actions instead of 5, that's a huge swing in the action economy.
Yeah. So I think that's the important thing when you're playing the game, to think actions and action points, and and you can tie people down with the cheap ones as well. You stuff a halfling in against a Baywalk, and he'll have to deal with that halfling. He can't go after your cook. He can't go after the victory conditions. So yeah, quantity is, I think, it's a good thing in Arkworld.
Yeah, and it's really cool with halflings, since they're shorter models, they don't just get cover sometimes. Sometimes you just can't see them behind a wall.
Yeah, hiding behind windows.
Yeah. That could be such a big deal on a table with a lot of terrain, is you not only have the quantity of models, but it's hard to get to them to kill them in the first place, or knock them out rather.
Yeah, it is, and with just a few tweaks and for a little money, you can always upgrade them to make them even harder to kill. Just basically make them into tar pits to just bug in and just keep people from doing what they want to do.
Yeah, and then conversely, you have like the town guard has that determined hack which can break armor. So your guys are harder to kill, and they make the other guys easier to knock out.
Yeah, but you need to make them act.
Yeah.
Act as a group, and that could be a bit tricky because if you have the Beowulfs or the elves who could just plummet forward with the big guys and just kick their way through, or like the undead Leviathan we talked about last podcast, that rams straight through the entire halfling village.
But you brought up the word tar pit, and it's going to be one of those terms that I think that we should bring to the people at large. So when they talk about the game on the Facebook group, everyone kind of has the same vocabulary. You have tar pits, which are those weaker characters that their whole point is pretty much to get up to those heavy hitters. Usually they're naked, which means they don't have any items or equipment. They could have some if you want a stronger tar pit, but their whole point is pretty much get to the big guy and don't get knocked out until your big guy can take on theirs.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, usually a tar pit's naked, but you can have someone that's fully armed, which is usually someone with heavy armor, at least one item and weapon, really dressed to the nines, and someone that's going to probably be your heavy hitter. So you'll see that with the sheriff and the town guard, who at base they come with their armor. The sheriff has the light armor, and the town guard has heavy armor built in, and that makes them a little easier to get the rest of that equipment for.
Built in, that's another term you might be using a bit. Or baked in, so everything that is included when you get the model. So when you get this model, it has that equipment.
And usually the cost of that equipment's factored into the cost of the model, and it's kind of discounted, which we'll talk about a little later when we get to the militia and the town guard. And something pretty important is the ability to sustain an army. So sustain is when you give the warband the ability to live well beyond a reasonable amount of time, which is usually going to be with defensive abilities, armor, and healing, especially shields, which are pretty well regarded as the strongest item in the game.
Yeah, and sustain can also be different kind of things, like the wild elf summoning thing, something that can get back, or the undead who can raise thing back, and you thought you got rid of them, but you don't.
Yeah, so that abilities as well that bring things back, or even abilities that reduce your opponent's ability to respond to you. You know, we talked about Spoon Whack and how that would reduce an opponent's AP on a crit. So something like that really helps your guys live a little longer.
I think you're meaning the Furious Wallop.
That too, yeah. Yeah, I was just looking at the Battle Cook. Have him in my head still.
Same ability, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there are some terms that are pretty common in games, like threaten or threat range, which is just your base move plus your attack range. So it's usually for halflings 4 inches, because it's your base move and your base-to-base melee attack range. With a ranged weapon, it could be up to 16 inches.
If you give them a sheep, you got
then you're really talking.
Move as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then we 8 inches move.
And that long move could help you get what's called the Alpha Strike, which is hitting first. If it's a big enough hit, it could set the tempo for the game. It's one.
And also decide what to go for in terms of objectives and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it sets the line of engagement. So if you have your Ram Riders, you can be way up the board. You know, you could be at the second, third of the board, and keeping your opponent way back while you're busy getting all the objectives. And that's worth a lot. It can make your mount worth way more than 35 gold.
Yeah, things like that you have to look into when you're setting up a warband. What do you want them to perform? But we're going to talk about that, aren't we?
We are. We've talked about a lot of equipment options. I think they deserve going a little deeper into each option. We have things like our shields and our light and heavy armor. And as we said before, those kind of provide that universal sustain for the group. Like, anyone could have a shield, save the Trollhound. Anyone could have the armor, save the Trollhound, of course. But that's that thing that brings their little bits of health that much further.
Yeah, and especially the shield. It's a cheap item that you really, really get value for, because re-rolling a failed save on you get 8 strikes on you, and you miss the first one.
Yeah, that's huge.
To be able to re-roll that one, it's a great thing to have that re-roll ability.
Like, that's the difference between losing a character in one attack and forcing your opponent to use more resources than should be necessary.
Exactly. And also the armor, I normally go for light armor only, because you lose movement with a heavy armor. Movement because of leg it rolls.
Right, yeah.
And let's face it, you will leg it in this game, and you will fail them. And when you do, you are at such a disadvantage. So light armor, to me, is way better than light armor shield above heavy armor any day.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that, because that heavy armor, that +1, it makes your first legate go from almost an 80% chance of success to like a 66% chance, and you don't want to be rolling that 5 or 6 on your first legate, you know?
No, you don't. Definitely don't. And the armor is, for those who don't know it, you remove 1 hit on every attack you do. You take. So a thing that would normally give you 1 damage doesn't damage you at all. Mm-hmm. So it's a cheap way to expand the life.
Yeah, and then heavy armor is 2 damage, which
exactly,
it's twice as effective, but is it really with those legate rolls?
And especially if you're lying on your back, you're at a huge disadvantage. You roll 2 dice instead of 1 dice when you're saving, so you have to pick the lower roll. And that's basically, instead of having a 50-50 chance of saving, it's big. Mm-hmm. Normally, people lying on the back get killed.
And that's also kind of something I don't like about two-hand weapons, is rolling a 6 when you're defending. It counts as a failure instead of a critical success.
Yes.
So,
and a critical success neglects 2 attacks taken. I don't think the two-handed weapon is that big of an advantage.
No, especially not on halflings who, they only have 6 health to 10 health to begin with. Like, that's such a big. It gives you a good amount of damage, but you end up taking so much more in return.
Yeah, because you will be targeted out for return attacks. What you could have used them for is, like, say you have somebody going in, sucking up, like a tar pit, go in, sucking up the opponent's AP, and then having these bring it in afterwards to take them out. Or have them running around plucking people lying on their backs.
That's good too. And I think someone on the Facebook page suggested mounted 2-hand weapon users, which it gives them the speed to engage to do the damage, so they don't get shot up on the way in, hopefully. And they also get that extra health.
Yeah, that's not a dumb idea, actually. Haven't tried it. I might now do that, however.
Yeah, it's definitely a thought.
So you also have the spear, so that cheap equipment, and you can attack even if you're not in base contact.
Yeah,
and through friendly characters.
It gives you that 2 inches, which, if you're a 4-inch base move, that pretty much increases your threat range by 50%.
It does.
And for 10 gold, you can't beat that if you need that,
And it forms that very classic shield wall front with spear, second rank, like type of attack. So if you really want to make formation units, you can really focus your attacks when doubling up like that. I think that's the only reason to pick the spear, really, is that if you want to have them hide behind a tar pit.
Yeah, and then there's actually a neat trick that I like to do with spears. If you put one directly on one side of an opponent's character, about 2 inches away, and another on the other side of the character about 2 inches away, he can only move to attack one of them. And they could both get attacks on him. So it's a good way to force your opponent to choose who they're attacking, and it keeps you from being bunched up, which is also really nice. Because you look at the make orders and take orders, and when you have to attack the same character, when you take the order to act as one, all your guys got to get bunched up. It leaves you susceptible to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Another
and
thing...
they also have the ranged weapon. Also really enjoy it. It's a cheap way of, as you say, have threat. But it doesn't do much, in my book. But it is there.
Yeah.
And you have to...
It's only power 5. And it's a pretty short range for Arc World, but...
Yeah, but it's nice to have something that you can use to thin down things before you strike them. So in the same turn, you have like 2 archers going after the one target. And you can maybe get it out of the way or wound it sufficiently to strike it later with something else.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I would go for the ranged weapons if I don't want to take a Thing Flinger. Because that's an expensive bullocks, and range weapons aren't that expensive.
Yeah. But Thing Flinger is so much fun.
It is. And we'll definitely have to talk about that in detail later. And then, on the other side of the ranged aspect is the torch, which I really don't like with halflings because your range attacks are weak, but enemies could be strong. And torches give the enemy reroll for ranged attacks against you when you have one.
Yes. I do, however, like the torch. Not many, but 1 or 2 torches in a decent-sized warband. And the reason for this is it causes fear in beasts and monsters. So, like, you send this pesky little halfling with a torch trying to shush away a troll, and it works. Because the trolls don't have that good of a bravery, so you can, or a troll, or summon creatures for the wild elves, or warhounds, and I don't know if it says if it's fearsome to mounted creatures.
Yeah, beast and monsters, so I guess if a beast could be mounted, it would. Or even the mount itself.
We need to get a Q&A on this one, because... Yeah, but I think mounted equipment counts as equipment and not as a beast.
Yeah.
However, you have the beastmen riders who are allowed to ride beasts.
And then you know what? Maybe someone dismounts their mount and has that extra character. Like if I were to have someone mounted on something crazy like a juvenile forest dragon, and then I dismount... Yes. there's that juvenile forest dragon that's a beast, and he's 160 gold. If I get that fearsome check and he fails it on my 40 gold plus the 5 for the torch halfling, that's pretty good. That's really
It
good.
is. And I have games where torch guy is scared of a troll and the troll guy is scared of the torch.
And they run in
Because they
opposite
had to-
directions.
Exactly, and it was great fun. So it's a cheap item, but you have to use them against the right things.
Right.
It's like if you face against an Albionican army
Yeah, it's not great.
with nothing, you're basically just standing with a big target on your head. You can, however, most likely toss that item away.
Mm-hmm.
Use a feat system.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I toss. You run up behind cover and you toss it to set aflame something. You might be able to set something afire that really causes havoc on the Albionican lines, but that's up to the players of the game to how much role-playing elements they want to include in it.
And then even if you don't, it gives halflings some play against the elves, because the torch gives your halflings +1 power against flammable characters.
Yes.
So it's not a lot, but it's not nothing.
And it helps against the Wood Fiends,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, and the, if I'm not mistaken, the Briar Elk is flammable as well.
Yes, yeah.
Beautiful model, by the way.
I know, I got one for the Christmas sale. I can't wait for it to come in.
Ooh.
Which, that's something we'll talk about later too, because I made a little oopsie that I'm happy with. We'll get to that in a bit. But for now, there's other forms of sustain, like the health potion, which
Yes.
I would have put with the armor, but it deserves its own limelight, just because of how strong it could be for halflings compared to other races and factions.
Yes. Then again, it costs 15 gold to put life back into a 80 gold sheriff. So it might be worth it, it might not be worth it. And if you got a cook as well, you might get those hit points back cheaper with a more versatile.
Yeah, I like it on the militia and the town guard, because if you can roll a 6 on the health potion, you completely fully heal that character unless they're mounted. And that could be huge just for the satisfaction of this guy is still here and now he's not going anywhere else. Because nothing's more frustrating than leaving someone on 1 health. And then it's more frustrating because they're healed back to full.
You thought you got me, but no, you didn't.
Not today.
But we mentioned the cook, and as equipment goes, you got that pot-bellied cauldron, which is a brilliant item in my book. Not only does it grant you 1+ armor, but it gives you the ability to generate Arcanite tokens. And Arcanite tokens are so good to have lying around. I think you're able to buy them separately for all warbands.
First one's 25 gold, and they go up by 10 every time after that, I believe.
And the pot-bellied cauldron is 30 gold.
Mm-hmm.
And it includes up to 5 Arcanite tokens, if you're lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that 50-50 shot to get one every day of the week with how strong it is, especially with the spells that the mage casts for the halflings.
So I think if you include a cook in your warband, and I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but you should have a cook and you should have a pot-bellied cauldron.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Unless you're playing very thematic and say, you're right, well, I want this hunting party with everything equipped with ranged weapons and spears, for instance.
Right.
Like the rangers that came with the troll bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're playing very thematically, you probably don't want to. You could probably go without the cook, but most halfling warbands should have a cook.
And I think if you have the gold for it, a lot of warbands should have that town standard too, because that could be such a useful item, not just because it lets you reroll bravery checks for halflings. It lets you reroll bravery checks, period, for your warband. So
friendly characters.
Mm-hmm.
All friendly characters.
When it comes time to recruit someone from out of your kingdom, that can save you so much trouble with managing your AP.
Yes. It does say friendly characters. That I'm assuming that counts as dogs as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyone in your warband is considered friendly. So, if you recruit a troll, then for some reason he's encouraged by maybe it's
the cloth waved around.
Maybe it's the picture of the food on the cloth.
Could be. Or just knowing that this cloth grants him whatever it is he's joining them for.
Yeah.
All right.
And of
And we
course,
talked a bit about the cook. Should we go on deeper in him?
yeah, he's probably one of the strongest characters for halflings, in my opinion.
Not on his own, mind you.
Mm.
He's like a supportive role, throwing burgers at people.
Yeah. What it comes down to is he's the type where if you have a plan and you need it done, he has a spell for it. So, if you want to move a little faster, he's got that mutton stew. If you need someone to hold the line, he's got those burgers.
And when you want them to kick in some serious butt, that Cockledrift Madras, that attack, it's
Spicy.
1 AP and it gives you power 8. On top of that, you've got Torch. So, say you're going to go troll hunting or Cockledrift hunting, then you give them that Madras and he is on fire.
Yeah. And that's one of those ways you make those 40 gold halflings become so much more. You give them that big attack, and you could be throwing, 9 attack on something flammable? That's big.
And if you give that to your sheriff with 4 AP, and also I really do enjoy the magic system in this game.
Yeah, it's very well done.
So that's another reason for bringing the cook, just to flip the tarot cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't really worry about overloading, because once it's done overloading, he basically done his job.
I actually think you should try to overload for mystery meat. I mean, I wouldn't say try to overload. I'd say try to go for mystery meat. And if you're close but not quite there, don't be afraid to overload, because casting 2 spells on one character, that could be really strong, especially combined. You have the sheriff, he uses a potion, and then you follow it with 2 hearty veggie stews. So you have that sheriff going from, almost dead to fully healed, like nothing. So I think mystery meat, if you overload it, you're good. Throw a health potion on the cook, he can use it just to overload more. And he's probably one of the only...
good strategy.
Yeah, he's probably one of the only casters that I would say overload as often as possible.
Yeah, and after all, he is the true heroes of the Halfling community.
Yeah, he's more of a hero than the sheriff is.
Indeed.
The sheriff, he's really important because he's got that make orders trait.
And he is the beefiest character with 10 HP and 4 AP. So he is the most beefy character you've got. And he comes with armor as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he comes with that light armor, which is really nice. One of the things that I like to do with him is if I critically hit someone with Furious Wallop, I won't try to knock them out if I'm engaged to someone else. Because I could Furious Wallop the second guy and really mess up the opponent's AP economy. Because then that's 2 models with -1 AP instead of a knocked out model and a fully battle ready one.
It's like they do in Warfare as well. Shoot to wound, not to kill.
Mm-hmm.
Because a wounded soldier is a bigger burden than a dead one.
Yeah, especially, if they get their tar pit on you, you knock out half of their AP in one shot, really. It makes it so much harder to counter that.
True. And the other bit beefy characters we got the town guard that comes with heavy armor. So that's like the 70 gold coins for the model, plus the heavy armor for 30 gold coins. So they're basically the same as a militia with heavy armor.
Mm-hmm.
But they got a better heavy attack. The determined hack is power 7 and it breaks armor, while the thwack attack of the militia has got power 6.
Yeah, and then they also have 1 more life and 1 more AP to begin with. So, you're paying for the heavy armor and getting so much free. So a lot of the times, if you want a militia with heavy armor, just take a town guard.
Yes, and they are bodyguards. So if you have them next to your friendly commander, you may distribute hits against the commander onto the bodyguards instead. So you could basically toss 2 hits on each town guard next to him. That would be neglected in their heavy armor.
That's a good strategy. I didn't even think of that.
It is very clever, and you keep your commander alive, and you basically give him super heavy armor.
Yeah, and you could even save gold and run your commander naked at that point.
Well, I would probably give him heavy armor as well, because he had to tag along with the town guard.
Right.
Anyways, but then we have a more like stand fast approach, like come and get us instead of we come and take you out.
Yeah, it's that late game anchor point compared to the early game militia. Maybe the militia's mounted faster.
Yeah,
Because when it comes to it, the militia's the backbone of the faction, really.
it is. They're jack of all trades. They can do, depending on how you equip them, really.
Yeah, and they're pretty much the embodiment of the faction, where they're cheap and weak, but you can get a lot of them. And with take orders, you can move a lot of them. So their quantity is a quality of itself. And even their damage isn't terrible. On an average roll, Thwack hits harder than it looks it.
It does. Normally, I'd go for, depending on what they got of equipment, but I'd rather go for the thrust, because 2 thrust gives you power 8, while a whack gives you power 6.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
But then again, if they got armor, you want more power, so that more goes through the armor, and not as much as saved by the armor.
Yeah, and then when it comes down to it, you pretty much always want to take at least 3 militia, just because it lets you take advantage of take orders for longer. Because if you take just 3, once you lose the first one, take orders is a third less effective. But if you take, 5, 6, 7, you lose 1, you'll still have 3 to affect with the take orders.
Yeah, I think another reason just to bring the Halflings militia is just to have the flexibility, like we talked on beginning of the episode, where you can decide how the game would go. If you have many cheap ones, you are much more flexible in your strategy.
Yeah, especially you equip them all differently. You can respond to threats as they come.
Yes.
But the Halflings aren't without threats of their own. They got the Thing Flinger.
Oh. If you got the Thing Flinger, in my book, you need militia around it. You need to crew it.
At least 1, if not more.
Because that's the thing. It doesn't have that many AP on its own. So when you fire, you need the crew's AP to be able to do anything, really.
Yeah, because shooting with it, that's a hard feat. So it has 4 AP, but you need 3 successes to shoot. And when a militia member donates AP to it, that increases the chance of success so much.
It does.
And, it's shooting 20 inches away. So, it's a big gun from a big distance.
Yeah, and you need, just to get the listeners into it, a hard feat that's 3 successes. So you need to decide how many dice you're going to use, and 3 of those dice need to be 4, 5, or 6. I wouldn't go for a hard feat unless I have at least 5 dice.
Yes, 5 to 6 dice definitely, if not more.
Yeah,
and that's the thing, the beautiful thing about the Thing Flinger. If you have 8 militia base to base with it, they could all donate their AP. Because 8 militia, so it'll have 20 AP. You shoot 2 to 4 times, or you just go crazy and go for 6 or 7 shots, and at some point you're bound to roll a 6 on a die and a 5 on another.
But that gives you 2. That gives you 2 hits. So then it sucks up quite a bit of gold to have that Thing Flinger crewed. And in my book, that's basically what's a bit of a deal breaker on it. Either you have a big enough warband to justify taking the Thing Flinger with crew, because just the Thing Flinger on its own is a bit of waste.
Yeah, it's probably not gonna throw a lot of stones on its own.
No, but if you have 3 crew members, you could justify taking those 200 gold coins in that war machine.
Yeah, and then the worst thing is rolling a 1, because the Thing Flinger has an ability called Random Payload. Before you attempt your feat to shoot, you roll the d6 and see what happens. So on a 1...
Basically what ammo you get.
On a 1, if there's a Halfling militia in base contact, then it gets placed in base contact with the enemy you want to shoot. And the militia takes d6 hits and gets knocked prone, which happens even if it's an unsuccessful feat. Even on a 1, you want the feat itself to be successful.
Yes. But then again, it is a 10 power attack. Even with quite heroic saving, you're bound to knock out a target.
Yeah, that's one of the things. You aim a Thing Flinger at your opponent's commander or even their mage, and you just go for it. If you roll a 5 and get that Honest Stone, then it's a power 14.
Oh, yes.
And 14 dice, you could get a lot of crits on 14 dice, which is, your 6.
Or you could sort of like double up and go for like a bomb brew. If you get a bomb brew, that gives you all within 3 inches of the target is prone, and then follow that up by another attack.
Yeah, and you could also follow that up with militia stealing items on the prone enemy, because it's an easy feat to steal an item on someone that's prone.
I think we just have the Monster Hunter and Trollhounds left, haven't we?
We do. And I mean, with the Monster Hunter, there's a lot to say, but also there's so much you can't say, because it's really the anti-monster specialist of the faction, and it has such a deep toolkit. When you look at the Monster Hunter, there's a couple of abilities. The lasso, the cunning thrust, and the traps. You can do so much with the lasso and the traps. You can cut off an entire avenue of someone's plan of attack if you take like 2 to 4 Monster Hunters and just lay traps every round. Because anything that gets too close to the traps takes 6 hits, which isn't huge, but it's big.
Another thing I think I like about the traps is that they have to do a medium feat, not to set up the traps.
Yes.
So they have to spend action points in order to stay alive. And so you basically use all your action points to set the traps, because it's a medium feat and you want to make it work, or else the action points it's thrown out the window. And then you basically set up like a perimeter of, you're not going within this area, I'm controlling the battlefield because of the traps. And
it comes into that AP denial that we talked about, where, if I need to do a medium feat, I want to use at least 3 AP to do it. So if you're an opposing character that might only have 3 or 4 AP, you're just not going there.
And then you can, as a Halfling player, you basically control, let's say you set it in front of an objective, and you basically control that objective until you manage to secure it.
Yeah, and even lasso, if you roll a critical hit, the enemy character has to do an easy feat to escape, or they can't move. And, that's AP they're spending that's not going to attacking you.
Yes.
So it's those little bits of sustain that keeps your 6 health halflings around way longer than they should be.
And another thing, I think it's a bit of a do or don't for the Monster Hunter, as in whether you take it or not. It's immune to fear from monsters and titans. Again, it's the same with the torch. If you're playing somebody who's got a lot of monsters, and if you're doing like the Arcanid Queen scenario or Dragon scenario, the Monster Hunter is a no-brainer. But if you're not, then if you're playing, again, like the Albionicans that don't have any monsters in them, or the Undead Raiders.
Yeah, where they have the range.
Yeah, the rats. Yeah.
Or the rats. And even, I would totally use a rat to set off the traps. And not think
easily.
About it. 15 gold for that, yeah.
And then just swarm through. So, yeah. And the hounds, in the first edition, the hounds were like the no-brainer. They were cheap, they were fast, they could suck up a lot of damage.
Well, they kept 2 of those adjectives. They're fast and cheap. They're a little easier to beat now, but that's fine, because their only job is to get to a monster or a titan as fast as they can and just cling on.
And that's hilarious. Just having the Trollhound sink their teeth in and just be a pain in the arse for the monster player.
With Cling On, if you make a successful attack at power 5, then the Trollhound gets to do that attack every time the monster is activated. So with a Titan and a monster, you have the split activation. If a monster attacks a Trollhound, then you roll a d6. And if you're successful, you stay clung on. So you can have a ton of Packhounds on some Titan. And every time the Titan activates with split activations, he's taking a power 5 hit. So it's a really steady damage over time.
Yeah, and it ties down the monster so that you can set up other things at the same time. And if they then choose to do other things, then I assume you can move the Titan with a Trollhound still clinging onto it.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, the way the rules are written, which is something I love about the rules, is that they're fairly open. So a lot of things aren't written down, and it leaves it to you as a player to kind of put it to your imagination.
Yeah, and we have that gentleman's agreement, which is at the very start of the book, which basically say, guys, we're playing for fun. Don't be too hard on us. So, so I would easily say that if you wanted to move away with your Titan and my Trollhouse playing out, well, right, move ahead, but I'm coming with you.
Yeah, I'm getting that free ride.
Yes, piggyback.
And then, you know, as with the militia, you always want to try to take more than 3 Trollhounds, because they have Pack Hunter, and that lets you take advantage of that for longer. You know, it's pretty much the make orders move as one ability.
But without having to spend the action points to do it.
Yeah, it's just free. If you take like 5 Trollhounds, it's probably a good number. They're only 35 gold too. It's not like they're terribly expensive.
I think they're good.
Yeah, and
they're agile as well.
Yeah, so
that means you can really put some distance in.
So yeah, they got that 6 inches of movement, but you can go so much further than that implies.
Yeah, could easily double it.
I don't know. There's so many people with so many different strategies with each model, each character, and so many different experiences. You know, I think this would be a pretty good place to leave it off and let them discuss in the comments of the Facebook post their take on the various characters and strategies that they also have played. So, Dagfinn, once again, I thank you so much for joining me on the Explorer's Journal podcast.
It's my pleasure.
On the next episode of the Explorer's Journal podcast, Dagfinn and I talk about things that halflings are afraid to see on the table, non-halflings that may want to work with your halflings, and also a purchasing order for those who can't buy the full faction in one go. Join us next time on the 3rd episode of the Halfling Deep Dive, and have a wonderful Mildark day.